I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Just a few weeks ago, I had been proud of myself. My body was in the best shape it had been in years. My energy was through the roof, and I was actually enjoying life. Then came that comment. My own son, the kid I raised with so much care, telling me to stop wasting time at the gym. At first, I laughed it off. Maybe he was joking. But the way he said it, sharp, dismissive, impatient, made my stomach turn. That's when I realized this wasn't about my health. This was about control. He wanted me to quit investing in myself, to become less focused, less independent, so I'd be easier to manipulate. So I stopped. I left the gym. My routine vanished overnight. My mornings, once filled with weights, cardio, and music blasting in my ears, were now silent. My energy dropped, my mood soured, and I felt a creeping sense of regret. But I convinced myself I was doing it for him, my son. Maybe he needed me to focus on family. Then came the call. "Dad, I need your help," he said nervously. His voice carried that familiar mix of hesitation and expectation. "Help with what?" I asked, suspicious immediately. "It's the wedding," he admitted, almost whispering. "I don't have enough money. Could you lend me some?" A chill ran down my spine. The timing was perfect for him, wasn't it? I had just given up the one thing that made me strong, and now he was asking for money. It didn't feel like an innocent request. It felt calculated. I could almost see the gears turning in his mind, the plan that had been forming all along. "Money?" I asked slowly, letting the word hang in the air. "For your wedding. How much are we talking about?" "Just enough to cover the venue, the catering, the essentials." He avoided my eyes. That's when I knew he thought I was weak now, distracted, easily swayed. That was his mistake. I paused for a long moment, thinking. I wanted to scream, to confront him right then and there, but instead I stayed calm. Calm was better. Calm was strategic. If he sensed fear or anger, he would have won before we even started. "All right," I said finally, my voice steady. "We'll talk tomorrow. Come by my office and we'll go over everything." That night, I sat alone in the quiet of my study, thinking about every interaction I had ever had with him. There were patterns, little lies, subtle manipulations, moments where he tested boundaries. And now it all made sense. The gym comment, the sudden financial need, the timing of everything, it wasn't coincidence. He was trying to control me, to take advantage of my generosity. By the time morning came, I had a plan forming, and I wasn't going to let this slide. He wanted money? Fine. But if he wanted it, he would have to reveal exactly what he was capable of first, and I intended to find out every detail. When he arrived, smiling nervously, carrying a folder of what he called wedding expenses, I greeted him with a polite, neutral smile. Let's go through everything, step by step, every receipt, every quote, every plan. His smile faltered slightly. He thought I'd fall for his charm. Little did he know I had already started documenting everything, recording every word, every hesitation, every subtle attempt to manipulate me. What started as a simple request for money was about to turn into a revelation, a deep dive into the person I thought I knew, the man my son truly was. And by the end of this story, I would realize just how far he was willing to go to get what he wanted, and how far I was willing to go to stop him. The next morning, my son showed up at my office with a manila envelope that looked far too heavy for a simple wedding budget. I could see the nervousness in his posture, the way his eyes darted around the room like he was expecting someone or something to catch him in the act. "Dad, here's everything," he said, sliding the envelope across the desk with a false casualness.
Just the bills, the deposits, nothing unusual. I smiled politely, leaning back in my chair, pretending to review the contents. Inside, there were receipts, vendor contracts, and what appeared at first glance to be legitimate estimates. But the problem wasn't the amounts, it was the pattern. I had learned to spot inconsistencies over the years, the way a trained engineer notices a machine running just slightly off balance. Every detail screamed that this wasn't just about a wedding. "Some of these vendors seem unusual," I said, picking up a receipt for a high-end venue in a city he hadn't mentioned. "How did you even find this place?" "Oh, I looked online. Just thought it would be nice," he stammered. His hesitation was telling. He was lying, or at least leaving out key details. I continued flipping through the folder, my tone calm but firm. "And these payments, they're due next week?" I asked. "Are you planning to use your savings, or—" He hesitated, avoiding my gaze. "Well, I was hoping maybe you could help with some of it." That was the moment I realized just how far this was going. He wasn't just asking for money, he was testing boundaries, seeing how much he could take before I pushed back. And the gym comment? It wasn't about fitness. It was the first move in a bigger game, one designed to make me weaker, less focused, more compliant. "Interesting," I said slowly, leaning forward. "You know, this is exactly why I've been keeping track of everything lately." I reached for my tablet, showing him a file labeled Observations and Patterns. His face paled the instant he saw it. What is that?" he asked, trying to mask panic with anger. "I've been reviewing your actions for the past few weeks. The gym, the sudden financial needs, the time end of everything. I've recorded conversations, kept track of your requests, and cross-checked them with online accounts. You're clever, I'll give you that. But clever isn't enough when the person you're trying to manipulate is paying attention." He swallowed hard. His confident posture was gone, replaced with something much more fragile, fear. But he tried to recover, placing the manila envelope back on the desk with exaggerated care. "Dad, you're overreacting. This is just a wedding, that's all. There's nothing shady here." I let him stew in his own words, letting the silence stretch. Every second of discomfort was a small victory, a crack in the facade he had so carefully built. "And yet," I said finally, "I can't help but notice how convenient it is that you suddenly need money right after I wasted my time at the gym. Almost like someone knew I'd be distracted. Almost like someone was counting on me to be vulnerable." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. His plan, whatever it had been, was unraveling right in front of him. And as he sat there, trying to figure out what to say, I realized that the real power wasn't in the envelope, or the money, or even the wedding. It was in the truth, carefully revealed piece by piece. That day I made a decision. I wasn't just going to protect myself. I was going to expose the full story. I would show him that manipulation, greed, and lies had consequences, and I would do it in a way he would never see coming.
That evening, my son called again, this time with an unusual urgency in his voice. "Dad, can we go over the wedding plans tonight? I think we need to finalize the vendor payments." I paused before replying, letting the silence hang. It was a subtle move, but enough to make him uneasy. "Sure, but let's do it at your place. It'll be easier to review everything there." There was a brief pause on the line, just long enough for me to hear the tiny shift in his tone, hesitation, uncertainty. He quickly recovered, agreeing without question. Little did he know, I had been preparing for this exact moment. When I arrived at his apartment, the lights were low, the room arranged to look normal. He had even laid out the manila envelopes like he expected a casual review. But I wasn't here to review anything. I was here to observe. "Why so quiet?" he asked, trying to mask his nerves with humor. "Just thinking," I replied, scanning the room, my eyes catching every minor detail. The faint smell of a new leather sofa, the unusually expensive wine bottle on the counter, the slight tilt of a picture frame that suggested someone had been moving things around carefully. It was all part of the pattern I had been tracking, the subtle fingerprints of someone trying to control the situation. He handed me an envelope, smiling nervously. "This one's the deposit for the caterer. Everything else is ready." I opened it slowly, pretending to check the contents. Inside, a stack of receipts, contracts, and invoices. But something felt off. I pulled one out and examined it carefully. The signature at the bottom wasn't mine, but it wasn't his either. Someone had forged it. "Interesting," I said, keeping my tone calm. "This signature, where did this come from?" He froze for just a split second, long enough for me to see the flicker of panic in his eyes. I got it from the wedding planner. She handles all the paperwork." I leaned back, letting the disbelief take its time. The wedding planner, right. And they just so happen to have the ability to forge signatures perfectly. Fascinating. He started to stumble over his words, trying to explain, but I wasn't going to let him off that easily. "Son, I need to ask you something serious. Are you asking me for money because of the wedding or because something else is going on?" The question hung in the air like a thundercloud. I could see him calculating, weighing his options, trying to decide whether to lie or come clean. And then he chose the lie. "No, Dad, just the wedding, nothing else." I smiled gently, but inside the gears were already turning. This was exactly what I needed, the first concrete sign of deceit. Every story he'd tried to sell me, every layer of his charm and confidence, was cracking under careful observation. "All right," I said, closing the envelope slowly. "We'll review everything tomorrow. Make sure you have all the documentation ready." As I left, I felt the shift. Something had changed in his demeanor. The confident, entitled tone he carried for weeks had given way to subtle worry. He was beginning to understand that I wasn't just a man who spent too much time at the gym. I was someone who noticed patterns, someone who understood strategy, and someone who wouldn't be taken advantage of. That night, back in my study, I laid out all the receipts, contracts, and notes I had collected over the past few weeks. Every small lie, every hesitation, every unexplained payment was there, forming a roadmap. I wasn't just going to protect my money or my home. I was going to expose the full plan, layer by layer, until the truth was undeniable. And deep down, I knew that when he realized I had all the pieces, the panic in his eyes would be worth every second of preparation. Because the real test was about to begin. The next morning started like any other, but there was an uneasy tension in the air. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, reviewing the notes from the night before. Every detail of my son's requests, every subtle lie, every slight hesitation, it was all part of a pattern. The doorbell rang sharply at 10 a.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. Hesitant, I opened the door to find a man in a crisp suit holding a leather briefcase. His eyes scanned me briefly, polite but calculating. "Mr. Davis?" he asked. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "I'm Richard Cole, a licensed notary. Your son requested I deliver some paperwork for your review regarding his upcoming wedding," he said, placing the briefcase gently on the counter. Immediately, a cold feeling ran down my spine. I had anticipated this, someone trying to legitimize his schemes, someone acting as a professional front. The perfect setup to manipulate me into signing something I shouldn't. "Please, sit," I said,
gesturing toward the kitchen table. Every movement was deliberate, calm, but inside, my mind raced. I needed to gauge his intent without revealing that I already suspected the deception. As he opened the briefcase, I saw a series of folders, stamps, and official-looking documents. My eyes scanned the signatures carefully. My own name appeared multiple times, signed in my handwriting, or so it appeared. My heart didn't skip a beat. Instead, I smiled faintly, pretending curiosity, while mentally cataloging every tiny irregularity. "Fascinating," I murmured. "These look professionally done." Richard paused, a subtle flicker of unease crossing his face. "Yes, Mr. Davis, everything has been notarized properly, all legal requirements fulfilled." I leaned in, softening my tone. "Tell me, why is it that all these payments and contracts were arranged without my consultation? Surely your son could have informed me." Richard's hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his papers. He wanted to surprise you, sir, a gesture to make everything easier." I smiled, letting the words hang between us. "Easier, huh? That's an interesting approach to wedding planning." My eyes locked with his, and I noticed the smallest flicker of doubt. He was beginning to realize that I wasn't just a passive father. As he spoke, I casually reached for a pen, pretending to review one of the documents more carefully. "I see here that some of these contracts require my explicit consent. Curious, because I don't remember signing these." Richard swallowed, his calm veneer starting to crack. "Sir, everything is in order if you would just—" I raised a hand, cutting him off. No, let's slow down. I want to make sure I understand everything. We'll go page by page." Inside, I was thrilled. The tension in the room was palpable. This was my opportunity to see the cracks, to observe the truth emerge naturally. Every hesitation, every slip of confidence, every slight hesitation, it was all part of a pattern. Just then, my phone buzzed with a silent alert, a small message from my security system indicating that all cameras and audio were active. Perfect. Every word, every gesture, every reaction was about to be recorded for the evidence I needed. I leaned back, calm on the surface, my mind racing with the possibilities. "Richard, I think it's best if we involve someone else to verify all of this before moving forward, just to be absolutely certain." His eyes widened slightly, the first real sign of fear. "Someone else?" he asked cautiously. "Yes," I said, sipping my coffee slowly. "Someone who specializes in reviewing legal documents and signatures. Someone very thorough. Perhaps a professional who investigates patterns of fraud." Richard froze, the briefcase tightening in his grip. He suddenly realized that I wasn't an ordinary father who could be manipulated with charm and paperwork. He realized he had underestimated me. And that realization would change everything.
By the afternoon, the house felt different, tense, electric. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of paper seemed amplified. I knew my son would return soon, and when he did, I needed to be ready. Sure enough, around 4 p.m., the familiar sound of the front gate echoed through the hall. I took a deep breath, letting my calm demeanor mask the storm of thoughts inside. The doorbell rang, and there he was, my son, looking confident, smiling as if nothing could go wrong. Behind him, Richard Cole trailed nervously, clutching the briefcase like a shield. "Hey, Dad," he greeted, his voice casual, but his eyes flicked nervously at the table where I had laid out the documents.
I just wanted to finalize some of these wedding arrangements. Everything's ready." I gestured for them to sit. "Yes, I've been reviewing the paperwork you sent. Very thorough." He frowned slightly. "You've seen it all? Everything's fine, right?" I smiled faintly, letting the words linger in the air like smoke. "It's interesting. I do have some questions, though. Certain signatures seem slightly off. Perhaps I'm imagining things, but I've had some experience with documents like these." Richard stiffened, and I could see the first signs of panic in my son's posture. My words were simple, casual, but each one landed like a hammer strike. He tried to regain control. "Dad, come on. Everything's legal. The notary verified it," he said, forcing a chuckle. "Yes," I replied slowly, leaning back in my chair. "But tell me, why did you arrange all of this without speaking to me? And why did you need Richard here at all? Isn't it usual for a family to discuss these matters before contracts are signed?" The smile faltered. "Well, I thought it would be faster if it was all handled professionally, less chance of mistakes." I nodded, pretending to consider his words carefully. "Faster, yes, but sometimes the fastest way can be the most dangerous. You know, a small mistake, a single forged signature can unravel everything." My son's hands tightened into fists on the table. Richard shifted in his chair, glancing nervously at the documents. That was it, their first real crack in composure. "Let's go through this step by step," I said casually. I opened the folder in front of me and began reading aloud, pointing at each signature, each notation, each official stamp. "Here, this looks like a forgery. And here, this is not notarized correctly." I could feel the room shrinking around them as I spoke. My son's voice grew sharper, defensive. "Dad, this is ridiculous. You're making a big deal out of nothing." I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice to a calm, almost conspiratorial tone. "Nothing? You asked me to trust you completely, but these documents, they tell a different story. And it's not the story of a careful, loving son. It's the story of someone trying to manipulate their father for personal gain." The words hit harder than I expected, and I saw his jaw tighten. Richard's knuckles whitened around the briefcase. "Sir, maybe we can clarify this." I cut him off, raising a single finger. "No, I don't need clarification. I need honesty. Start talking. Why all the secrecy? Why all the documents? Why try to force me into this?" My son's face went pale. It's just, I needed money for the wedding. You never helped when I asked." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Needed money? And the house? Is that how far you were willing to go? Steal your own father's property to fund a party?" Richard opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, letting my son crumble under his own admissions. The tension in the room was suffocating. Every second that passed made their deception clearer. "You see," I said, my voice calm but deadly precise, "I've spent my life analyzing problems, predicting patterns, preparing for outcomes. And I see this attempt at manipulation for what it truly is. You've underestimated me at every turn." My son's eyes darted around, realizing too late that the web he had spun was now tangling him. Richard's hands shook as he muttered something under his breath. I leaned back and smiled faintly. "Now, we have two choices. You can admit the truth, or we can see what happens when we bring in someone who can verify these documents properly. Someone professional. Someone who knows fraud when they see it." The shift in their expressions was subtle but unmistakable. Fear had replaced confidence, and that fear, that was exactly the leverage I needed. because now the game had truly begun.
The tension in the room was unbearable. My son's confident mask had crumbled completely, replaced by a desperate, pleading expression. Richard Cole fidgeted in his chair, glancing repeatedly at the door, as if escape was still an option. But there was no way out now. Every move, every word had been anticipated. I took a deep breath, keeping my tone calm, almost conversational. "So, you wanted money for a wedding. That's what this was all about, right? Not love, not family, just a transaction." My son's voice shook. "Dad, please. I didn't think it would go this far. I needed help. I thought you'd understand." I shook my head slowly. "Understand? Son, you asked me to trust you. You asked me to give everything, and you tried to take more than I was willing to give." My eyes fixed on the forged documents spread across the table. These papers, they don't just represent money. They represent betrayal, lies. Every signature, every stamp, every false notarization, it's all part of a story you wrote to take what isn't yours. Richard swallowed hard, muttering, We didn't think he'd notice so quickly." I leaned forward, my hands resting on the table, letting the silence settle. Notice? I don't just notice. I investigate, I prepare, I predict, and I see patterns. You underestimated me because you assumed I was soft, old, distracted. But I'm none of those things, and now you've left me no choice. My son's hands trembled, clutching the edge of the table. "Dad, it was just a mistake. I didn't mean... I'll fix it. I'll pay you back." I let out a slow, steady laugh. "Pay back? You think this is about money now? No. This is about accountability, justice, something you never considered until the consequences stared you in the face." Richard shifted uneasily. "Maybe we can come to an arrangement." I interrupted, my tone cold, precise. "No arrangement can undo the damage you tried to cause. You tried to manipulate your own father, your family, for personal gain. And now you're about to face the truth of your actions." Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A tiny vibration I had been waiting for. Detective Miller's signal. Every piece of evidence, every recorded conversation, every forged document had been backed up, verified, and prepared for immediate action. I stood slowly, letting the gravity of the moment sink in. "The authorities will be here any second. Every word you've said, every act you've committed, it's all documented. And the moment they arrive, you'll answer for it. You will not walk away from this." My son's face went pale, and Richard's nervous posture turned into outright panic. They knew, finally, that their deception had no escape. The calm, calculated patience that I had maintained for weeks had led to this inevitable collapse. And then, the sound of doors slamming outside. Police uniforms flashing, their presence undeniable. They moved through the front entrance with authority, cutting off any chance of flight. My son froze mid-step, realizing his fate. "Mr. Weaver?" Detective Miller's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Everything in place? Are you ready?" I nodded, keeping my composure. "Yes, proceed." The officers moved in swiftly. My son tried to protest, to argue, but the evidence was overwhelming. Every forged document, every incriminating admission, every manipulative tactic was accounted for.
There was no escape, no loophole, no denial strong enough to withstand the truth. As they led him and Richard away, I felt a wave of relief mixed with disbelief. The betrayal that had cut so deeply was finally met with justice. The house, my family, and my integrity were intact. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe freely again. Detective Miller approached me, her face a mix of satisfaction and respect. "Mr. Weaver, your patience and preparation made this possible. You didn't just protect yourself, you exposed a criminal operation, saving countless families from similar fraud." I nodded, looking around my home, my sanctuary once again. "It's over," I said quietly. "But I've learned something more than ever before. Vigilance, preparation, and a clear mind can turn the tide against even the closest threats." As the sun set that evening, casting long shadows across the living room, I realized that justice had been served. The battle was over, the war was won, and I had proven that betrayal, no matter how close to home, could be met with careful planning, courage, and unwavering resolve. And in that quiet moment, I knew one thing for certain: family, trust, and integrity were worth every second of vigilance, because no scheme, no manipulation, no betrayal could ever outsmart a mind prepared to protect what truly matters.